Alright, now that we know what JavaScript actually is, let's now learn how to write code in a special JavaScript file and then how to run the code in the browser. Now, to get started with this section and with this course, you need to start by downloading the starter code from this GitHub repository that I created for this course. So this repository is at this URL here, which, in case you missed it, is at the very beginning of the course. So in the first text lecture of the first section. And in order to now actually download all of the starter code, all you need to do is to click on this green button here and then download zip. Okay? Now, by the time you're watching this video, GitHub, which is this website where developers basically host code, so later this website might look a little bit different, but just watch probably for a green button which then says download zip. All right. Now, if you're on a smaller screen or maybe on mobile, then this green button will actually not be visible here. So in that case, just scroll down a little bit here to the FAQ section, and then here you have this link. So you can also download all the code by simply clicking this link here. And by the way, since we're already here in the FAQs, please make sure to also read all of them before you actually move on in the course. So you will probably have one of these questions at some point, and so it's easier to then simply find the answer right here. Okay, but that's it here for GitHub. Now let's go ahead and extract all of this data that we just downloaded. And so here we go. So this is the starter code. And here you have basically one folder for each section or each project that we're building in the course. Then inside of each of these folders, you will always have one final folder and one starter folder. So you see that happens in all of these folders here. Now, the final folder is basically the final version of the code as it looks by the end of the section or by the end of the project. And so in case something goes wrong in your code while you're following the section, please then compare your code with the final code that is included for each of these sections. And that will then allow you to find and fix any mistake that you might have made in your code so that you can keep going in the section. But anyway, what we're most interested in the beginning is the starter code. So each of these folders has the starter code, and that's basically the starting point of each of these sections or projects. So let's now actually drag this folder here onto the desktop. And then I'm going to open it up here separately. And in my case here, since I'm actually the one writing the code first, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have these two folders here. So I will actually go ahead and take the index out, but you should not do that. So you should use this starter folder here as your project folder in VS Code. Okay, but again, I will now delete these two because I don't need them here to build this course, basically. But anyway, let's now open up a new VS Code window. So new window, and then here we click on open folder. And then we are already in the desktop. Let's just make the window a bit bigger here. And then I will select my project folder here. So in my case, that's going to be this folder. But again, you should now use that starter folder that's in here as your project folder. So I think that's the best way for you to approach this. So with that project folder selected, hit open. And then here we see the index.html file that we already had in our starter code. And this is an HTML file because usually JavaScript is attached to web pages, at least when we're building front-end applications, as we learned in the last video. So to start, we always need an HTML document like this. because our JavaScript needs to be attached to an HTML document. Now in HTML, there is a script tag where we can write JavaScript. So let's do that here in the head, right beneath this style. And if you're completely new to HTML and have no idea how it works, there is a very short crash course on HTML and CSS in section 5 of this course, I believe. So if you want, you can take that just to learn about the very basics of HTML and CSS in like 30 minutes or so. Anyway, let's now create this script tag here in which we will write our JavaScript now. Because in the first video, we wrote JavaScript in the console, remember? But that's not how real development works. So instead, of course, we write the code in files. So let's just write for now the same code that we wrote in the first video. So let JS equal amazing. And then in JavaScript, we usually add a semicolon to the end of each line. And this will then let JavaScript know that we are done with this line. And it's actually not really mandatory, and you will see some people omit the semicolons, but I still consider it a good coding practice, and I believe it makes the code a bit cleaner. So, just like before, we are then saying if JavaScript is amazing, then alert that JavaScript is fun. And once again, don't worry yet about how this code here works, okay? Just type it for now and just have a general idea of what it does. Now to actually execute this code, so in this example, to show this alert window, all we have to do is to open up index.html in the browser, because again, this is where our JavaScript is now attached to, right? So let's do that. And so I'm going back to my desktop and then open this file with Google Chrome. And indeed, right away, we get this alert saying JavaScript is fun. And so that is coming from our index.html. We can click OK, and then it finishes. And we see our starter file, which is actually this text. So if you see in VS Code, JavaScript Fundamentals Part 1 in this h1 tag is exactly what we see here. And so we opened up the right page, and also our JavaScript is working. So if we reload this page now, we should see that alert window again. And indeed, here it is. Okay, let's push this to the side here. Here's the code from our previous lecture, VS Code, and push it to the other side. Okay, we can then get rid of this sidebar here that we don't need by hitting Command or Control B, or by clicking this file icon. And with this, we have enough space to see the editor and the browser here on the other side. So let me show you something very important now, which is how to see results from our code back in the browser. So let's take this math operations that we did in the previous lecture. So that was 40 plus 8 plus 23 minus 10. Let's give it a save. And you see that JavaScript actually automatically formatted this code. And I will show you later how you can set that up for yourself. Anyway, if we now reload this page here, where do you think this result will appear? So clearly it's not in this alert, and it's also nowhere on this page, because we didn't tell JavaScript to put it on the page. So let's open up the inspector here, and I will do inspect, and then the console, and then again increase the text, command plus, plus, and plus again. And you see that the result is also not in the console. So why is that? Why is this result not in the console like it was before? Well, it's because the console is just an environment that was built to execute small pieces of code and then show results immediately. So just like we did in the previous lecture. But it doesn't show results of our operations in code by default. Now, if we still want to display results, for example, from a calculation like this here in the console, we need to tell JavaScript to explicitly output that result to the console. And we can do that using a special function called console.log. Okay? And then if we take this code here and copy and paste it, and then save it, and then reload, then we need to click OK so that JavaScript can move on to the next line. And then we actually get the result printed to the console here. And it actually says that it's coming from index.html at line 31. And so that's exactly the line where we did do this computation. Okay, but let's recap here, because I know that this is confusing for many beginners. So in the last lecture, we were already in the console, and so then there was no need for using console.log. We also needed no script tag when we were in the console, right? But now we are actually in a script and no longer in the console. And so now we need to explicitly say console.log whenever we want to access the developer console like we did here. Okay? So basically, this is like building a bridge between our script here and the developer console on the other side that lives in the browser. And now to finish this lecture, let's actually take this JavaScript code out of the HTML file and put it into its own separate JavaScript file. So what we have right now, this script here, is called an inline script. And the only advantage of an inline script is that we don't have to load another file. But on the other hand, it's pretty bad for separating the website content from the JavaScript logic. And so usually we use external JavaScript files, as I just mentioned. Okay, so let's come back to the sidebar here and create a new file, which I'm going to call script.js. And that's a pretty standard name for a JavaScript script. Okay. So let's take that back, come here, copy this code, and paste it here. And then once more, VS Code actually formatted the code here nicely. If it didn't on your computer, then just do that manually, and I will show you later how to set that up. Okay? And now we can get rid of this script here. Great. Now we have a better separation of concerns between presentation and logic, and this also makes it easier to maintain code in the long run. All there is to do now is to link this JavaScript file to the HTML file, because right now our HTML has no way of knowing where the code is actually located. So if we execute this code by reloading the browser, now nothing will happen. Again, because this HTML file right now does not know where to find the JavaScript code. So let's do that connection. And we usually do that at the end of the body tag. Okay. And actually we will use script again. All right. But now this time we're not going to put any code inside this script element, but instead we are going to specify the source attribute. So here all we need to do is to then specify the name of the script and the location. Now in this case, this script, so this script.js file is in the same folder as index.html. So all we have to do here is to just write the file name like this. We don't have to specify the entire path to the file. Okay, so if we save this now and reload, then you see that it's back to working. So we have this pop-up here again, and then our result of this computation. Now, if you didn't get the alert window or this output here, then that means that your script file is probably not correctly linked to the HTML file. So in that case, please make 100% sure that the script file is in the exact same folder as the HTML file. Also, make sure that you correctly spelled script src just as I have it here in my HTML. And finally, also make sure that you have no errors in your JavaScript code. So these are some common mistakes that I see people make, which then leads to their script not being correctly linked. Okay, but anyway, at this point, we no longer need index.html open here. And here we have only our code logic. The rest of the presentation is gone. And so this is much cleaner and much easier to work with. Great. So now you know how to link a JavaScript file to an HTML file and then how to run it all in the browser. And that means that you're now finally able to really start learning the JavaScript language. So see you in the next lecture where we're going to start doing just that.